Hello and welcome, listeners, to the podcast revolution. Please don't take this personally, where women's empowerment meets fearless conversation and bold action for change that benefits everyone. Here, I address those please don't take this personally moments, that statement that's been weaponized by power structures to maintain the status quo and silence voices. And here, we instead are going to reclaim that to a collective call to stop taking things personally and start taking action. I'm your host, Lynn Ferrari, and I'm so very grateful to be here and so very grateful that you are here. At the heart of this podcast, my aim is to inspire women in every generation to step into their power and create new paradigms that shake up the dysfunctional power plays we've all been hit with in those please don't take this personally moments. And while this podcast is for everyone, the focus on women's empowerment is at the core. Why? Simple. I'm tired of fighting immovable objects. We've been asking for far too long to be let in, and frankly, the time for asking is over. On any given day, according to the World Health Organization, women take up between 49 to 51% of the global population. That's half the world. Yet somehow we still find ourselves waiting for permission, for acceptance into spaces we've always had a right to. And real sustainable change won't come from us knocking harder on the same damaged doors, waiting for our place at the table. Because there is colossal power when 50% of the population rises to the agency that we deserve. And to do this, we must face what is holding us back. Both the real obstacles and the ones we've unknowingly built within ourselves. We've been carrying stories passed down from thousands of generations that shape how we see the world, how the world sees us, and how we see our place in the world. And here's the deal. Are you ready? We don't need permission. We never did. But somewhere along the way, we were conditioned to believe otherwise. And for some women, like in Afghanistan, that conditioning has hardened into a brutal reality where female cats can roam the street freely, yet women receive the death penalty for doing the same. And until we see these chains for what they are, we will stay locked in this cycle of asking for what should already be ours. To the fearless champions and allies out there who show up every day and do the right thing, thank you. Keep going. We need you. I didn't start this podcast, though, to applaud what's already working. We are here to talk about what's broken, the belief we have that we have to ask for approval to soar in a world that's already ours by birthright. So last episode, I spotlighted permission as the shift from taking it personally to real action, because bold decisions and talk mean nothing without the belief that we have the right to act. And absolutely, there are real world limits. There are laws and obstacles, but it is also, and very often, the permission we deny ourselves that hold us back. There's the doubt, the hesitation, the am I allowed to, that's been ingrained in us for so long by these norms. And that is what we break. And when we do, we move together in mass, unstoppable, like water cutting through rock. Our power is in how we flow and reshape everything in our path. And I'm not talking about just challenging the system. I'm proposing we keep building and growing this parallel one, rooted in empowerment and disallowance of what we will and won't accept. And that forces the old to evolve and fade away. And that's how real lasting change is made. Today's episode, we unpack permission further, the kind that keeps us stuck and the historical structures that still shape how we move through the world. There's a line from the movie Mad Max that says, "Everywhere you go, there you are." Because we can't outrun these dynamics. We have to face them. From an early age, we've been conditioned to ask for permission, especially as women. It's woven into our culture, this idea that we need approval before we speak, to call out a wrong. But waiting for permission has sidelined us for far too long, and dysfunctional systems feed on that hesitation. So as long as we keep waiting, nothing changes. There's a great saying I love that says there are three things we can't change: the past, the future, and someone else. So we can change ourselves, how we show up, how we respond to dysfunction, how we empower. And that's how we build something stronger. Just imagine it. We don't have to fight or attack this dysfunction head on. We build something more resilient, something that draws others in because it works. And when we stop waiting for permission and we replace it with empowerment, we force those old structures to evolve or die, just like carving through stone. And let's be clear, this is not about reckless moves. It's about starting in safe spaces with trusted allies and mentors where you can strengthen your voice and build your empowerment. It's not about charging into the danger, but building a system that lets us act without waiting for permission. That's always been ours. We don't need authority. We already have it. So how do we do this? It starts with one bold choice: to give yourself the permission you've been waiting for. We step forward in safe spaces, backed by our allies, crafting a new playbook, and we practice like a football team pushing down the goal line. Whether it's addressing dysfunction, launching a bold idea, or dealing with passive-aggressive behavior, we don't need to fight head-on. We become like water, fluid, fierce, and shaping the landscape around us. Remember, fire can't survive without air. If we stop defending and feeding the dysfunction, it will suffocate. Change doesn't always come through destruction. It comes through creation, resilience, and a steady, deliberate progress together. So let's dive in with our guest, Ming Chen. Welcome, Ming.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's
Woohoo.
I know it's been a long time coming. Let me introduce you, Ming, to our listeners. Ming is not only an outstanding human being and amazing woman, she is an executive and leadership coach dedicated to creating more seats at the table for women, working at the intersection of race and gender and tech and leadership. And as a certified professional co-active coach and an accredited ICF coach, she also facilitates the Women in Management program at Stanford Graduate School of Business. And she's got 20 years experience, over 20 years in leadership roles in tech and other industries. And Ming now focuses on empowering women to lead and thrive. So
Yes, thank
yeah,
you for the
yeah.
intro. I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, you and I met because online, because you had such a
Mhm.
compelling voice that the algorithms found us, right? You're in the
Mm,
space of women empowerment. I'm in the space of women empowerment. And I just found you and said, absolutely, I wanted to follow you. So, as you know, my focus here is around permission and really understanding that challenging these norms that hold us back. And I believe that the
mhm.
quote, to change the world, we first must have to confront the permissions we didn't even realize we were waiting for, is relevant. And
Yeah.
you are at the forefront of this. So let's just even start at the beginning a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your journey and how did you even decide to go out on your own, and particularly in this space?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's causing me to reflect like way back, all the way back to how I grew up. And so how I grew up was with some really strong women in my family. And so I didn't actually learn some of this bad behavior in terms of waiting for permission and waiting and asking until I started to grow up a little bit as a girl and then as a woman in this world. And then
Mm,
going, oh, wait, how come I'm not seen as equal? How come I don't have the same right? How come I don't have the same permission? And so that was sort of, I guess, subconsciously a thread throughout my life. And I even had a friend point out to me, like, oh, got a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, huh? Like a little bit of dick envy was the way she put it. Well, I didn't think about it that way. I never thought about it that way, but maybe I do, because it's why not me? Why
hmm
can't I? And
mm,
so that's that's causing me to think way back in terms of my journey. But in more recent years, in more recent time, it really was sort of this thread of why not me and why can't I? Because as I ran up through the ranks of corporate, as I kind of got through into the later years of my career, it was that same question. And I never really understood why. And to be quite honest, once I got to the conclusion that there is no good reason except for my gender and my race, that I was like, well, this is fucking bullshit. Like, I'm not putting up with this anymore. Like, and who said I have to follow the rules? Because
Mhm.
these rules were clearly put in place not for me, not to benefit me, but to hold me back. Right.
Mhm.
So it got to a point in my corporate career, at least, where that came to a head at Twitter, where I was like on a team of mostly men. I was like, this is bullshit. I don't need to put up with this anymore. And
Mhm.
so that launched me into my journey of, okay, what's important to me and why not me and why can't I? Um, Wanting to sort of help other women and empower other women through this because we shouldn't settle. We shouldn't be second class. And to your point, I think in your own threads and my own reading of what you're doing, like
Mhm.
there's no reason. We are just
Mhm.
as capable, if not more. And I think that's the secret.
Yeah.
If not more capable, right? And so the threat to the existing power systems are still there. The
Mhm.
threat to the existing patriarchy is it's nobody wants to give up their power, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to take it. And so
Mhm.
then how do we take it and create more seats at the table for us?
Which is the exact conversation we're here to have. And it supports my focus, which is around creating that taking it is around creating a system of empowerment, right? That
Mm-hmm,
is rival to
mm-hmm,
the dysfunctional one. What is curious to me, though, Ming, is you said that you grew up with very powerful women and then learned how to unbelieve it. And I had the opposite experience. I did
mm-hmm,
not grow up with powerful women. It was always told to me that I was going to be less than a
mm-hmm.
secretary. I was not encouraged to go to college. So I bring that up because I find here we both ended up in the same place, but
Yeah.
whether you start there or not, that the system definitely makes sure that you know that. So, was
Mm-hmm.
there a moment though, you knew you needed to do it, but was there a literal moment where you gave yourself permission to go big?
Yes, because it was, and we talk a lot about this in coaching, as you know, which is what is my head saying? And then what is my heart and my gut saying?
Hmm.
And so my head has always ruled, and my body has been fighting me the whole way, it turns out. you know, so it's very much about, okay, rationally, I know this is the safer path. If I stay in corporate, if I continue to make a good salary, it's much more secure, it's much safer. And yes, there's problems, but you do what you got to do, and then maybe you find fulfillment outside of work. Um, and that increasingly became untenable for me. Like
In your body.
there are in my body, yeah.
Hmm.
Because there are some people who can go, okay, work is just work, and I'll put that into perspective and I'll get my fulfillment outside of work, which is what I thought I was or who I thought I was. But my body was increasingly telling me, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Um, and there was like just dissonance there, just a
Hmm.
really incongruent, like it was just incongruent. And so the tipping point for me was, and I'm so glad that this happened and so grateful that it happened in this way, which is after I had one foot out the door of Twitter, and then I kept interviewing for these companies and getting to the last rounds of these interviews and going, oh, I feel sick to my stomach.
Mm.
And my body feels like it's caving in on myself. like, I don't want to do these jobs. Like, I just don't want to do them. And then in parallel, I had been going through coaching training and coaching certification. And in those moments going, this is amazing, right? My my body is open, my heart's open, my shoulders are back. I feel so incredible. And that contrast was enough for me to go, okay, I have to see what is going on over here. When my body feels so alive, when it feels so aligned to what I want to do and who I am fundamentally as a person, I have to explore this and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, in terms of tipping points, that was it for me. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I have to follow this
Yep.
because there's a siren song happening over here that I can't ignore. And maybe I'll
Mm-hmm.
crash myself on the rock, but regardless, I have to see what this says over here or what
And
this means.
either way, we're going to crash on the rocks, so they might as well be on your terms, right? Like that's the
Yeah,
part. So I
yeah.
really, first of all, the fact that you were aware of your body is so important. I think those we all have those cues, and that is the first thing, like what is happening here? And
Hmm.
then you listened. That to me was
Yes.
the brave part. You listened and you then said this was untenable. And I'm sure that you had fear and doubt and a number of other things, but that larger
Hmm.
part of you said, I do have permission to live my life on my terms, and perhaps others encouraged you as well. There's a woman,
Yeah.
her name is Diana Chapman. She's the founder, I think co-founder of the Conscious Leadership Institute. And she has a saying, if it's not a full body yes, it's a no,
I love
right?
that.
And I
Yeah.
think that especially for this gets tied up with us as women, in my view, because we're taught to be nice or, oh, don't take
Yeah.
it personally. And so we abandon that gut in feeling in our stomach or how
Hmm.
we're feeling about it.
Hmm.
So kudos to you for listening and having the courage and bravery to do it, and get out there so that we have the great fortune of having you as well and having you here today. So I do want to go back a little bit in our relationship, though, to this point. Here we are, two incredibly empowered women, thought leaders in our space, comfortable saying that we can be something different. But this is not the first time we taped this episode, Ming, is it?
No, it is not.
And so let's tell the listeners that story because I think it really speaks to how unconscious some of these lenses of permission are.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it gets back to your point about like we are taught to be demure or mindful of others or to always please others. And so as we were taping this episode, I think or the last episode, I think we had some really great moments in there. But as it went on, as we started to talk about some of the tools, I started to fall back on some of our, tried and true L&D things that we talk about. What is the situation and what is the behavior that you're observing and what was the impact on you? Which is all well and good as a framework. But I think what we're really trying to push the envelope on here is bringing yourself to the table, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Whatever that means, and no matter the situation. And so we lost that towards the end. And I think both of us recognized that afterwards
We did.
as we were reflecting on the episode that we had taped and
We
going,
did.
I think we played that a little safe.
Yep, we
Yeah.
did. I know. And I love how life just keeps breaking me open by
Mm.
just even doing this work. Again, as I think this is the part I really want to focus on with our listeners is wherever you are is just fine. It's about understanding what else, what and when those things happen. And I had that feeling, right? I thought when we left
Mhm.
our taping, I thought I would feel like we nailed it and it was so exciting. And I didn't feel that way. And I thought, and then
Yeah.
again, I questioned, oh, it's maybe you were over like whatever narrative I had. But the reality
Mhm.
is that we fell into a little bit of our old pattern. So
Yeah.
definitely want to model that and call that out to the listeners as you go out into the world and practice. You're not going to nail it the first time. These systems are
Right.
deep and our conditioning is deep as
Absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's okay to go back and try again,
yes,
like we're doing today.
right,
It's totally
right.
okay. Yeah.
So, to that point about conditioning, so I sent you some questions for you to think about, and you wrote an edit that was so small, yet blew my mind so wide open that speaks to this conditioning. So, I wrote a question something like, so when we ask for permission, and you said, no, no, there's no asking. Asking implies that someone has the authority and you need to ask permission to get it. We simply
Yeah.
need to take it, use it,
Hmm.
be it.
Hmm.
Wow. That was pretty
Yeah.
pivotal. So I didn't see that, but you did. So speak a little bit more to that mindset of this idea that we're asking for permission versus living
Yeah.
in the space where we're actually by birthright entitled to it.
Yeah. So it's interesting as we were kind of going through our document, I was like thinking about that word asking. Are we asking? Or and then it led me to, oh no, we're waiting. And then why are we waiting for permission? Because we're gonna wait a long time. Right? We're gonna be waiting a very long time. And so, and I think that we've seen that throughout, right? If you wait for it, if you don't ask for it, but then asking sometimes doesn't help either. We need to demand it, right? Because it's only when our voices are loud, it's only when we can go, no, 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 I have a right to be in this room.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, actually, what you said was not acceptable. When we take that power, the more that we get it back, right? Because then it's like, oh, this is not a person I can walk over or ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not about waiting or asking for permission. It's standing in that and going, I have every right to be in this room. I earned it. Nobody gave this to me. Nobody gave me permission. I took it. I earned it. I asked for it in a way that they could not ignore me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the big difference.
It is a pivotal difference. And again,
Yeah.
it blew my mind open. And so I think that that's an important key to just, are you asking? Are you asking? Because in prepping for this and even continuing to think about it, just the idea that because we're in a room and we are in in the dysfunctional parts, not all of them, but the parts where we are powered down, so to speak. How is it that it's our birthright? We're human beings, so
Mhm.
there's no reason for it, but
Yeah.
yet it exists, which brings us to more of so asking. So where did that come from? Well, one of the things I referenced earlier in the show was one of my favorite movies is Mad Max. And the line is, everywhere you go, there you are. And we
Mhm.
can't outrun some of these dynamics. And so I think it's super easy sometimes to just have clips or quick fixes. But the reality is that we have societal norms that we've been conditioned to that
Mhm.
condition us to ask for this permission without realizing it. And there is a not former, passed away British American anthropologist Ashley Montagu. And he is known for his work on race, gender, and human development. And he says, our biology does not decree that one sex rules over the other. What determines that sort of thing is tradition and norm. So everything we've come to be as humans, we've been learning from other humans. And it's
Mhm.
only in our attempt to break free that we feel how tightly we are restrained. So the things I want to talk about with you here are those societal norms. What we have institutions, education, religion. How do you see these societal norms play into the permission for us, but then also that those that believe they have the authority, how did it play into their belief that they have it? So basically wanting to unpack a little of these societal norms.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is a big topic. I feel like we could spend days on this.
Weeks,
Yes.
weeks and
Yes.
weeks.
Yeah. And it deserves that, right? Because we've had to live with this with these norms for thousands of years now, right? And
Mm.
I think what's happening now is we are starting to question that based on us having more independence, us having more agency. Um, but back then it was about, okay, how do I fit in? Where do I fit in? Because if I don't fit in, I will be ousted from the tribe and I will literally die, right?
Hmm.
Because if you don't have your tribe, if you don't have community, if you don't know where you fit into this dynamic, you're alienated and you
Hmm.
cannot survive without that. And now we're in a situation where we do have more independence, we do have more agency, and we're starting to question whether these societal norms and dynamics work for us. And in a lot of cases, myself included, they do not, right? I am not married. I
Hmm.
am single. I don't have children. I am like that single cat lady, or in this particular instance,
Happily.
single, happily single dog lady. And I am happy about it. And society and the patriarchy very clearly does not know what to do with me.
Hmm.
They do not understand where I fit in into this dynamic. And I am not interested in fitting into this dynamic because I know myself, I know my value, I know where I want to have my community and where I want to make my connection. And and it is jarring to society. It's jarring to the patriarchy who goes, well, if I don't know how to control this, then who am I as the
Hmm.
power, as the person or as the system in power?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. And to your point, change, no matter what, even positive change one may choose, like getting married, is a it brings discomfort because you're doing something differently. The neural pathways in your brains are seeing something different. What you almost like when
Right.
you go into a hotel in the night, you wake up, you don't know where you are. Like your brains are constantly searching for what where is my comfort zone? So
Absolutely. Because it's like and your brain does that. It has to categorize and bucket because that means, okay, I understand the world and that is safe. Now I know how to interact with my world. And
yes.
so when that gets disrupted, people are like, oh my gosh.
Yep. And I wish I could go back in time and maybe it was the 60s during civil rights and perhaps using my HR background, I joke that we had some kind of change management plan. Perhaps if we had said, hey, this is going to seem and feel uncomfortable because for a long time, this has been the system and you've been used to navigating in this system. So it's okay that you feel uncomfortable, but we're going to
Yeah.
move forward. And we
Yep.
did do that. We moved forward anyway, but we've been fighting all along to change these societal norms versus this idea that I'm introducing here. What would it look like to create an equal system that rivals that of empowerment, such that their air will be gone and the fire will die, or they have no other choice but to move along. So I have an
Yeah.
example. Uh, Again, conditioning, and even I. So this weekend I was at the airport and they have a lot of co-ed bathrooms now. And I walked in and it's all perfectly fine. It's got, safety and it's got locked doors and everything. Ming, I was uncomfortable. I was
Mm,
uncomfortable. And I thought, why am I
mm,
uncomfortable? Like everything's fine here because I grew up in a women's bathroom. And there was another woman in there. She was older. And I told her that I'm so surprised that I'm uncomfortable. I speak about women's equity and here I am uncomfortable. And she said, because it's just not the norm right now. She said, I grew up and we didn't have co-ed dorms. And then we did.
mm,
And we were all
mhm.
uncomfortable about it. And now that's just like not a big deal. So the good news is everything that hadn't happened even like before 1970 when we didn't have credit cards without our husbands, we didn't have Title IX, like we couldn't own
Mhm.
property. That's all different now because we decided collectively that that was in the best interest of society and
Hmm.
that was no longer the norm. So that is why it's important for us to understand these societal norms as we head into practicing change and understanding ourselves. Because I didn't
Yeah.
even know that I had an uncomfortable feeling about a co-ed bathroom until I went in
Hmm.
there. So I think
Hmm.
that those parts are really important as well. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think it's important for people to think about that as when you have that to go to your point, when you feel uncomfortable, to look across the table and what is that person's lens? Because it doesn't, wronging them isn't going to help. It doesn't
Hmm.
make that it may not be accurate or right or just, but if we're fighting it, we're not getting to how we can influence it. So we
Right.
have to understand those societal norms. And this is very new for me. I have been more of a we will fight person all along, but I've come to realize that um, we have, in order to change, we're going to have to influence and say, oh, look, it can be this way too. It was different before, it could be different now as well. Any other personal reflections or anything that you've experienced on any societal parts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's what you said about like not fighting it per se resonates with me, or what's the word I'm looking for? Being defensive against
Mm-hmm.
what's in place now. And I think that is important because it's not that we are trying to win to the such that the other party loses, right?
Exactly.
It is not about winning or losing. It is about how do we create more opportunities to learn from each other, to be at the table together, to be in each other's shoes and come at it from a lens of compassion and empathy such that we can grow together, right? Because
Exactly.
for me, it isn't so much anymore, at least, about going, okay, I need to vilify the person across from me. It is much more about, okay, what perspective or lens are you coming at this from? And let me also share my lens and my perspective because I want you to understand me as well. And I think that's been sort of the friction or the conflict that I've been experiencing is like you don't even want to listen to me. You
Right.
don't even want to hear what I have to say. And that is what I'm trying to change. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
demanding that you listen to what I say. I am demanding that you hear me
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
will not allow this to continue.
To have equity in the conversation. And
Yes.
this is pivotal to your point. We could talk about these for days. It's understanding other people's lenses without making them wrong. Meaning, yes, there are actions. We have laws about what's right and wrong. I'm not implying that there aren't any boundaries. But if someone who came from a country who was highly conditioned around men being dominant, maybe they were also religiously and educationally and professionally, that was a trifecta of dominance, right?
Hmm.
That's what they believe. So
Right.
to expose that person to, hey, here's how your lens is impacting this. This is how your belief system is showing up. And here's how it's impacting the business, how it's impacting my ability to listen. I think that's that stepping in because,
Hmm.
again, people don't want to be wrong. And to tell someone that their whole life is not necessarily accurate um, isn't going to help, isn't going to get us where
Right.
we want to go. So I
Right.
think that those parts are really, people don't even know. And it's
Yeah.
also okay. And I learned a lot of this from a course I did back in the day called Managing Across Borders. How can you take so many different people, backgrounds, structures, religions, cultures, and communicate about that one thing? And it's,
Hmm.
again, it is focusing on those values then, the value,
Hmm.
the mission of the business, the problem statement of the business. So I think it's about bringing those things out as well. And then also offering a reflection. Hey, it wasn't always that way, right? Like, well, we
Hmm.
always do it that way. Well, great. Like, what are some things that you've done before that you did that were also you're getting feedback weren't working that you did change or modify that actually is now the new norm? right? Because we
Mhm.
give people a way to like, let me take you on a journey. So I think that
Yeah.
those parts are really important as well.
Yeah.
One of the areas, though, around that, around why people may or may not speak up to those, to even be aware of those dynamics that are existing, speak to them eloquently so that they include versus offend, is that fear. There's a fear behind permission, especially for women in equity. So why, in your view, Ming, and again, I know this is one of those big topics that could take a week, but why do you feel that we need to play it safe? What's the real fear behind stepping out of line?
I think
Mm-hmm.
there is still that fear of being ousted from the tribe and
Mm-hmm.
not surviving. So there is still, I mean, we've evolved so much, but really not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it is still that fear of being ostracized and vilified and alienated and not then being able to survive. So I think that is conditioning that is a practice, a conscious practice to overturn. There's perceived fear around psychological safety. And
Mm-hmm.
this gets back to your point about, okay, what do you do when the other person at the other end of the or on the other side of the table is from a different background, is very used to the way things are, quote unquote. This is how we've always done it. And and it is getting out of your own comfort zone to say, hey, like, let me take you on a journey and let's think about like how things have changed or what circumstances were beneficial for us to change and why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can have that conversation only so many times with someone before you're like, okay, they're not really hearing me. They're not really listening to me or taking it in. And so I need to pick and choose my battles, right? Do I feel like this person is someone that I can have this honest conversation with, or is it not safe for me to have this conversation with him or her or them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there is that piece of it, the psychological safety. But then there are real consequences too, as you well know, and as
Mm-hmm.
I well know on a political basis from working in corporate, which is you say something that is quote unquote out of line or isn't taken well, and then all of a sudden you're on the chopping block, or all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden you're a threat to the harmony or the culture, and then you're being pipped out or have a package laid in front of you, or you're just fired outright. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of those things are real. And so we cannot discount that. And so it is about picking your battles, but also understanding the nuances of your own situation and going, okay, what am I willing to quote unquote step out of line for? And
Mm-hmm.
how strongly do I believe in this?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I have to lose? Because there are very real consequences. Um, and then even from the perspective of physical safety, right? As women, we do have to be aware of that. We do have to be cognizant of our own safety um, in any situation, whether that is in the workplace or outside of it, because that is a
100%.
very, very real thing. And so, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was
You
going to
want to say
say, when
something?
I grew up, my mother told me that if I were actually being harmed, that I should not scream rape because no one will come, but I should scream fire.
Oh, I got that advice as well.
Okay. And I tell
Yeah,
this story, and every woman agrees with me. And a lot of men are like, that's not true. I'm like, it is true.
it is
You
a
do not.
hundred percent true.
Yeah, I think that this is
Yeah.
an important conversation and perhaps another topic. Like I've got many episode topics here today. Uh, Perceived and real fear and safety. So
Mhm.
absolutely, I believe that landing and expanding, working within your allies, your contacts, your mentors, the systems that do work, the functional parts is the first place to go.
Absolutely.
And building that larger, like let's carve the rock through water, like relentless ongoing pressure to change the
Mhm.
system versus we're going to take the rocks out because it hasn't
Mhm.
happened so far. Um, and hopefully, with all of our work, maybe 10, I'm optimistic, 10 years from now, we won't have to deal with that. So Very, very important. And then to that point about being unsafe, that there really is, I don't think that people do even understand that, or that you and I understand that we even do it day to day, that the way I go out in the world, where I will walk, where I won't, those are real. And then
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace, yeah, to your point, you mentioned it, truth telling, et cetera, can get you packaged out, derailed from your career, et cetera. And the reality is that often others in different gender, being men, don't. They're
Mm-hmm.
rewarded for those types of behaviors, or it's overlooked. So that's where I think this, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a couple minutes, is like, how do we practice then? So in
Mm-hmm.
those situations, to instead of being angry about it or try to pretend it's not there, it's like, we know every meeting, every time this happens with this person. So what are we going to do as a group? Or what
Yeah.
am, what's the play I'm going to run? How am I going to do it? And literally practice. I know I've said this before, but like as a football team, week after week, because they don't just show up on Sunday to play the game. They run the play
Yeah.
all week long. And we
Yep.
need to do that to impact these
Mm-hmm.
societal parts as well as have power in numbers, because
Yeah.
it isn't often um,
Mm-hmm.
rewarded and it isn't safe. And I, uh, you know, authored an article recently called "The 5 Things I Learned from Being Packaged Out 5 Times," and all of them were because I was telling the truth. I was naming
Yeah.
it in a
Yeah.
way that got me packaged out. That being said, meaning I didn't follow my advice at that time. But I didn't have this advice at the time. This is part of the reason
Mm-hmm.
I started this podcast, is because I've realized that we need to do that and talk about that. And if there are true unsafeties, though, this is the HR in me, you absolutely need to escalate it to
Mm-hmm.
someone somewhere that's safe. Most companies have an 800 number or an ER line, and I know I'm focused a lot on business. I know there aren't 800 numbers when you're walking down the street, but to use the
Mm-hmm.
systems you have, because it goes to the fear. I'm afraid if I say something, I'm going to get in trouble. But the reason it's existing is because people aren't stepping up into it. And if our
Yeah.
leaders aren't protecting us, then that's a whole nother conversation as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So two things are coming to mind for me here as we're talking about this. And the first is uh, physical safety and like men not believing that if you yell rape, nobody will come, but if you yell
mhm,
fire, they will.
mhm,
I was trying to think of an equivalent, like the way that we go about our lives and in our world as women, like what would be the male equivalent of that or the men's
mm,
equivalent of that? And so I was thinking, oh, this is, you know how men are so afraid to go to prison because there is that chance of being raped? Like
mm.
that's how we go about the world. Okay, maybe not to that degree or to that
Yeah, but it's on the
level,
continuum.
but it is on the continuum, absolutely. And so it's like it's easy for them to be dismissive, right? Because they're not in quote unquote prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would even,
So
that's a really good example. I don't want you to forget your second one. So say the second one and
yeah.
then we'll come back.
Yeah. The second one was to the point about, okay, how do we change this? How do we become water on rocks and carve out this place for us? And running those plays, I think you have to have teammates. You have to have allies and
Right.
sponsors. And so I was just listening to another podcast where Malcolm Gladwell was talking about his new book, Revenge of the Tipping Point,
I just
over
saw it in
20
the
years
airport.
after his first,
Yep.
yeah, after 20 plus years of his first book, Tipping Point, coming out. And he was saying that part of his book addresses women on corporate boards. And so if you have one woman on a corporate board, nobody listens to her. She's isolated. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. Her perspective isn't respected. The second woman on that board, oh, now I have a buddy. Now I have a friend. And maybe it's not so lonely, but we still can't get anything done because nobody's listening to us. But the moment you put a third woman on that board, if
Mm,
it's say a board of like 9 people and there's a third woman on that board, then it's like they have to take you seriously.
Mm,
Then it is, oh, actually, I need to listen to them because there's now more of them, right? Or
hmm
there's more of us. And so it is very interesting. And that's why it's so important for me, like creating more seats at the table for us, because one's not enough, two's not enough, three is the tipping point. That's when you
hmm
start to get some traction.
hmm
Yeah. Anyway,
It's a very,
go
very
for it.
good point. No, so there's a woman, she used to be the former CHRO of Netflix, I believe. She says, why are we celebrating when there's three women on an executive team? Three is not half, right? And it's not just about the number. I absolutely want to put in the caveat of disclaimer of qualified, exceptional, talented people. Absolutely.
Mhm.
However, if we are truly going to get the best people at the table, we absolutely have to make sure that have women at the table. We're half of the population, so we have a
Mhm.
perspective. I just watched a movie on a plane with this guy's project goes badly because they did facial recognition, but it wouldn't recognize anybody other than Caucasians. And the person
Mhm.
says to the lead, "Did you have anybody diverse on the team?" And he said, "No." Now, it
Yeah.
was a movie, but that is a lens again, right? I was
Mhm.
consulting with a company where there were all, I'm sharing for the description, not the judgment, all white men at, Ivy League from Monsanto. Well, I told them, if there's nobody else in that meeting, you are not a diverse group. You're not getting diverse thought. You're getting Ivy League Monsanto white thought, which is awesome. It's just not
Mhm.
the only one, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those things are really important. And the other thing you said that I think is pivotal about men don't think of it like they're afraid of going to jail. I would make the case that they have some things that are even worse. They are afraid to be seen. They're afraid to be wrong. They're afraid to
Mhm.
go out into the world and think that they don't have the answers, that they're
Mhm.
afraid to make mistakes in front of their teams. And that where we shut down when we feel like, okay, it's not safe, they step in and fight,
Mhm.
right? So it comes out
Mhm.
in ways, I will not let you see that I'm vulnerable. I will not let you see it. So I think we're in the same different pews of the same church, but I think there's a lot to that there that we should follow up
Mhm.
on for sure. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so all of this the other thing is to me causes feelings about this, right? We're talking about how can we use this? How can we do it in a positive way? What do we do with the permission to be angry and
Mhm.
the permission to say no? There are definitely different rules for men and women in the world about it. And it's about, society frequently tells us get along with others, but at what cost? So how
Yeah.
does this, in your view, how did these cultural pressure to minimize our moment when there are moments to truly be in aghast at an activity, something somebody said to us, what a
Mhm.
promotion we've been, missed over for. So give me some Ming thoughts on that.
Yeah. So many thoughts. The first one being that as women, we do pay a tax for showing our emotions
Mm-hmm.
um, in a way that men don't experience. If
Mm-hmm.
a man is angry and he's loud and he's um, aggressive, he is seen as assertive and passionate and really cares about whatever it is he's talking about. If a woman does this, she's seen as unhinged, aggressive, like crazy, all of these other monikers that they give us. And so I don't want to discount that there is a double bind there. There is this tax
Mm-hmm.
that we pay as
Mm-hmm.
women for showing our emotions. And yet it is really important that we do
Mm-hmm.
because
100%.
again, we're talking about changing dynamics. We're talking about changing norms, right? Like I have a whole well of emotions, anger and rage included. And it's a way of understanding and knowing that a deep injustice has been done. A deep, deep injustice has been done. So if I am angry, if I am rageful, it's not for no reason. It's not because I'm quote unquote unhinged or crazy. It is because something has happened that is a deep wound or that is a deep injustice. And it is then about, okay, how am I expressing that in a way that is productive and effective? Right. And so I'm thinking of a really good friend of mine who just names it when it happens to her. She's
Mm,
like, I am really angry. And she doesn't like wave her hands around or she just says it. I am really angry. And it is interesting to hear, to feel my reaction to that. I
mm,
am, even when she states it, I am deeply uncomfortable. It's like, but wait, I have to stop myself and go,
mm,
but wait, why am I uncomfortable? She's owning her feelings.
mm-hmm,
That's okay. She's entitled to feel the way that she feels. That has
mm-hmm,
nothing to do with me. But my reaction is, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. Does that mean I have to soothe her? Do I have to stun her? Do I have to ignore it? But no, it's about rewiring my own reaction.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very real. It's
I feel you.
very
I hear
real.
you.
Well, and
Yeah.
you just named it again. It's the discomfort. And I strongly believe that we are not taught how to be uncomfortable, how to
Yeah.
navigate discomfort, and how to sit in it and welcome it as a catalyst for change or to inform
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
So, on building on what you said, agree and I think it's a key to take it away from gender and make it a key leadership focus. I don't believe leaders
Yeah.
share that traditionally, right? We're still dealing with the GE 1980, management ethos of like everything's perfect. We didn't talk about feelings. Yet it is the engine, it's the oil and gas to an engine. Human beings show up to make decisions, to run products, to develop technology. And we are emotional and we have feelings. But when is the last time you've been in a meeting where someone checked in at the beginning of the room? Right?
Mm.
To say, how's everyone doing today?
Yeah.
What's the key emotion? Or like even doing a word cloud or something. So you actually know where to start. So I think
Right.
the ability to share our feelings, and you named it in a respectful, I'm managing my body way, is required for key leading as well.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
to make it safe for those who
Yeah.
don't, right?
Yeah.
And to tie it, I think it's about, I am feeling this because of this. And I'm sure you may feel things too, like an invitation around it so that
Hmm.
people don't have to. And again, let's go back to society. Part of it is it was inconvenient if women are yelling or saying things or crying. And men have been conditioned not to show their feelings. And I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many personal and professional rooms, even at funerals, where someone's like, okay, I'm not going to cry. Why? Why are
Yeah.
you not allowed to
Why?
cry? So,
Yeah.
like bing, 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 you really hit it on the head. That ability to name it, I think people are afraid of their own emotions, first of all. Then we have a condition, think John McEnroe back in the 80s and now Serena Williams, who gets penalized for this. He made a career and a brand out of being the man who threw his racket, and she gets
Hmm.
penalized for it. So,
Yep.
what we're saying here, and what I'm saying on this podcast is, let's move past all of those because if we keep going with, well, they do it, how come we can't do it? That hasn't gotten us there anywhere.
Hmm.
We're going to have to be the leaders and the embodiers of the new way forward to
Hmm.
demonstrate that. And I
Right.
also think it goes about being liked and the difference between kindness and nice. So,
Hmm.
in these reflections that we do, I had a situation where I had paid for a service that I was not happy with. And this person knows my husband. So, for a long time, I kept making it okay. Oh, well, it's okay in the end, like weeks, Ming. Finally,
Mm.
I just woke up to myself and I went, I'm just being nice. And I finally said to
Yeah.
the man, I am not happy with the services rendered. I'm not happy with the outcome of it, and we need to do it over. And that's the bottom line. So
Mhm.
this demonstrating that I'm unhappy, demonstrating that I have feelings. Oh, be nice versus kind. Kind, one of my first mentors told me this. It is always kind, Lynn, to tell someone the truth in a
Mm.
kind way.
Hmm.
Kindness without being aware of how someone feels is cruel. That's different,
Yeah.
right? Kindness without compassion. But I think those are really, really big ones as well. So, all
Yeah.
right. I know that I could talk to you for a million years. However, I know I only get like 10 more minutes. So we have touched on a lot of really key important being aware of your body, being aware of the room, the role that we're playing. Oh, give me one or two of the things that you coach to that are about practicing, because I sincerely believe this is a key to our being that water through the rock. If we do not practice how to do it, we're not going to, in the moment, it's not going to go well. And I do this myself, practice how to have a difficult conversation, or when I get triggered, because I do, practice saying,
Hmm.
I don't respond to yelling. I'm not able to talk to you when you yell, and here's my boundary. So, what are some of the things you would encourage our listeners to practice, Ming?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I'm gonna try not to be too safe here like we did last time.
Okay, go big, go
Yeah.
Feral
But
Friday, Ming.
yeah, but it is much more about yourself, right? Regardless of what's happening around you,
Mm-hmm.
checking in with yourself and how you're feeling, what your body feels like. I think the awareness is the first and foremost thing.
Yep.
Because again, we're all on autopilot. We all have default behavior. And so, how do we start to practice? Is number one, just being aware. Like, ooh, this doesn't feel good. Why doesn't it feel good? And just starting to question that and understanding and pinpointing the emotion that's coming up. Because your
Mm-hmm.
body does not lie. Your
Mm-hmm.
body is your emergency broadcasting system,
I
and
love
it's
that.
telling you something is wrong, right? So listening in, tuning into that broadcast and going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what's happening here? Why does my body feel this way? What emotion am I experiencing? And then how do I want to handle it? That comes second,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
And this,
then you go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No.
No, I was going to say, and you can practice a bunch of tools and frameworks. Those are all out there.
Right.
But it is much more about, okay, tuning into that channel. Like, what's my body trying to tell me?
Yep. Yep.
What are my
Agreed.
instincts saying?
And tuning in, what is happening? What's my safety range? Right? How
Mm-hmm.
safe am I? And then
Mm-hmm.
what's the play? Is it to
Mm-hmm.
defer at this time? One, it could simply be out of a strategy, right? Like, I will get back
Mm-hmm.
to you on that, and you hold your power and walk away. And that's a way
Yeah.
we gain power back. Is it to identify what's happening? Whatever, to your point, there's tons of tools, and I have a bunch of links in the show notes as well. But one of them is I often use is, does any I'm experiencing this and I just want to check in with the room. Is anyone else experiencing this? Or I have a narrative in my head that goes like this. You're yelling at me because of this, or whatever the case. Like, is that true? Is it true that you're negating my word? Because it feels that way. And I'm certain that wasn't your intention. There are polite ways to say it. We're not saying
Mm-hmm.
playing it safe doesn't mean not being polite. You can be polite because, again, if you offend someone on purpose, or if you're in their face, no one does well with that. Everyone backs into their corner. That's fight and flight. But being
Mm-hmm.
able to to also say, did you mean it to come across as an insult? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's how I had it. No, I was just saying, okay, great. You were just saying. So just so you
Yeah.
know, when you say these five things, it comes across as an insult. And I'm certain that wasn't your intention. And, I'm certain because that isn't that I'm laughing because, I do say these, but not in this silly way. Because that wouldn't be in line with our brand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't do that. So I didn't think you
Yeah.
would. But there's a million,
Yeah.
million ways to do it. But it is the practice,
Absolutely. It
and I think
is.
the
Yeah.
allyship. And I talk a lot about
Mm-hmm.
the football team, but many, many professions do this. I'm always surprised that business doesn't. And what I mean by that is medical professionals have residencies, right, to practice how to do this. Law
Mhm.
departments, they have mock trials to practice. So I
Mhm.
think of all the takeaways is practice having your voice, practice being aware of where your limitation, just practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before I send you off to coach women into amazing empowerment, Ming?
I think we're just scratching the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and it's such important work. And there are so many things that this is bringing up for me that, yes, we could talk for hours about this stuff. Um, but yeah, I think what I want listeners to walk away with is it is in your power. You just have to take it. You don't
Yes.
need permission. You just have to take it. And so, what does that look like? First of all, being aware. And then to your point, like, what are some of the tools and practicing those things? Yeah.
Ming, thank you so much for being you, for having your voice, for having courage, for being willing to speak to me and our podcast revolutioners here today on this path to dismantle those dysfunctional power dynamics by replacing them with a system of empowerment. And all of the keys that you talked about today are so important. If you want to find Ming, her link to her website is in my show notes. You can also find her on LinkedIn. You would be remiss to not connect with her, follow her writing. You're just amazing. Thank you for this. And I know we will continue to talk online as well as offline, and join me on other panels. I'm going to have intergenerational, intergender panels. There's so much more to do on this revolution. And thank you for being on it and being my very first guest. You're a tough act to follow, ma'am.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to see what comes up next. And I hope to be with you on that journey.
You already are. Thank you. And that's where we're wrapping up today, podcast revolutioners. Permission granted. This is your official invitation. No more waiting for permission, no more sitting on the sidelines. We're not here to ask the system to change. We're here to grow one rooted in undeniable empowerment, just like water cutting through stone. Before I share the quote and playbook of the week, I want to revisit something I said in my conversation with Ming, that I was not raised by powerful women. And that is not accurate. They were incredibly powerful in their own right. They were simply denied access to their power and had taught me to not expect too much and look the other way in the face of inequity and domestic violence. And that's the lack of power I was addressing. So, our quote for this episode comes from legendary U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said, "Women belong in all places where decisions are made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception." Well said, ma'am, because we do not need permission to claim our place in a world where we make up half of the population simply because our reproductive organs are on the inside versus the outside. It is our birthright simply for being here. So, the playbook for today, I think you get it. Stop waiting for permission in your career, personal life, or activism. Pick one thing. Take one step this week, no matter how small, without anyone's approval. Perhaps you're worried about being judged. That is their issue, not yours. What I have learned is that it only stings if you agree with the judgment or the judger. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. You may be feeling afraid. Of course you are. Stepping out of your comfort zone is scary feeling, but that discomfort is growth. Remember that fear is simply an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And yes, there's a difference between fear and real danger. So step forward boldly but wisely. To those in a position that lead and mentor and support, your playbook is to use that role to lift those around you. Be the person who says, "Hey, I noticed in the room when someone's getting dismissed, that you might say something like, interesting, what do you think, Jane or John Doe? And deflect it back to the person. And actively make sure that there is room at the table, both in real time and in preparation. So you might say to someone, hey, at this meeting, I'm going to defer to you on this topic to give you airtime. So let's prepare. Not because they need your permission, but because they need your agency, the agency you hold to ease the path. Lastly, Ming and I discussed be unapologetically you. Practice scenarios and responses out loud. In the car, with a friend, a mentor, a colleague, just like a football team runs plays all week long, so when it's game time, you're ready. One of my go-to resources that is remarkable is Jefferson Fisher. His link is in the show notes. He breaks down exactly what to say in tough situations, how to take control, how to pivot or stay silent in super simple ways that everyone can use. I use these methods myself and coach to them often. So fingers crossed, he'll also be a guest here soon too. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to stand alongside you as we drive real change. If this episode hit home, keep listening, spread the word, and let's build this revolution together. All the details to reach me are in the show notes. I want to hear your stories, your ideas, your please don't take this personally moments. We have only just begun. Remember, don't take it personally. Take action. See you next time.